So we're talking about using benchmarks to compare fractions when both the numerators and the denominators are different, not the same. So goodness, we can't think about the size of the pieces because they're already different sizes and we've got different amounts. So we said that we are going to use a benchmark, like how our thumb is a benchmark. We know that's about an inch long, and our pinky finger, the width, that's about a centimeter long. When we're thinking about fractions, we're thinking about unit fractions to use them as our benchmarks. So unit fractions are when you have 1 in the numerator and it's a denominator that you can imagine in your head really easily. Now for me, the best unit fraction for me to use, to try and use first, I always start with 1/2. Okay, so if I'm thinking about cookies, because my son loves cookies, his name's Jacoby, and Bob's my imaginary friend, and he loves cookies too. So Bob ate 2/3 of a batch of cookies, and Jacoby ate 4/10 of a different batch of cookies. I was busy baking. Okay, they were arguing, trying to figure out who ate more cookies, which means that they're going to have to brush their teeth. But that's a different story, okay? And I decided to help them out because I said, guys, we've got different numerators, we've got different denominators, so we need a strategy to try and figure out who ate more cookies to compare your fractions. We should use a benchmark. So we went ahead and we tried to use 1/2 as our benchmark to compare these fractions. Let's see. So there it is. How do I move this out the way? Let me move this up because my head's in the way. So we're going to use 1/2 as our benchmark to compare these fractions. Boom, just shifted my number line up there a little bit, right? So we're comparing 2/3 and 4/10. I apologize. 2/3 and 4/10. 2/3. There it is. And 4/10. So we've got to figure out how close both of these numbers are to 1/2, okay? Now, I'm going to start with 3. I've got to figure out what's half of 3, okay? So if I went beep, held up 3 fingers and chopped it down the middle right there, I would end up with 1 finger on each side and then half of a finger on each side. 1.5 is half of 3. So I'm looking and I see that 2 is more than 1.5. So that means that 2/3 is going to be bigger than 1/2. 2/3 is more than 1/2. So I'm going to put it over here on this side because 2/3 is larger than 1/2. And when I'm talking about numbers that are larger on my number line, I know that I'm moving towards the right-hand side. Okay, now 4/10. If I have 10 and I split it in half, boom, we got 5. So 4/10 is less than 5/10, which means we have less than half. So when we're looking at these fractions, we're trying to figure out which one's larger and which one's smaller so that we can settle this argument between Jacoby and Bob to decide who ate more cookies. What do you think? I think Bob ate more too. His 2/3 is larger. It's closer to 1. So we used 1/2 as a benchmark for us to compare 2/3 and 1/2. And we see 2/3 was more than 1/2 and 4/10 is less than 1/2. So that means that Bob, who ate 2/3 of a batch of cookies, ate more than Jacoby. My goodness. So I guess we settled that argument between them. Now the good news is both of them are going to brush their teeth. And let me go back to our presentation. Here it is. We've got one more thing to discuss when we're thinking about comparing fractions before we do some practice together. What do we do if the denominator is the same? Here we go. You just compare the value of the numerator. This is the easiest one. I saved the easy one for last, right? So let's see. Let's talk about cake. Because I like cake, okay? My favorite cake, strawberry shortcake. We'll talk about that later, okay? Now, let's say somebody gave you a cake, okay? And they were like, how much cake do you want me to slice for you? Would you like me to slice 2/8 of the cake for you or 5/8 of the cake for you?